We have NBC News Chief White House correspondent Chuck Todd, who can give us the behind the scenes of what led up to that moment where the president walked the red carpet and made that statement to the nation. And
also, let's just, because it's Morning Joe, Chuck, let's talk about the three letters you talked about last night. I was following your coverage. It was your first tip-off that this is not your typical presidential press conference.
No, it wasn't. You know, you're bringing up the fact that I got a three-letter emphasis on getting down here from a White House official who said, I can't say it's a BFD. And it was like, get down
Biden?
here, and you sit there.
What does that mean?
It wasn't Biden, was it?
Exactly. No, it wasn't the vice president, and it was. But it was this. It was. You know, they weren't trying to be funny about it at the time, but it was sort of like trying to almost steer us a little bit away, because what David brought up, I think there was a lot of initial thought that maybe this has something to do with Libya. We knew what happened with Gaddafi's family in the 24-hour previously, and boy, is there something going on there. And it was their subtle way of saying, number one, hey, TV network people, you need to break in. Just trust us on this. And number two, this is a little bit bigger even than the stories that you might be thinking that this is about in the 24-hour period, Joe.
Wow. Hey, Mike Barnicle, that really is something.
It definitely beats the long-form birth certificate.
Something huge was coming up.
And it also, it begs the question in my mind, and I'd like to ask Chuck this. You're there at the White House each and every day, Chuck, almost each and every day. Right. The mind warp that is that job, that on Friday, after having given the green light to this operation, the president travels to Alabama and other places in our South where they've been devastated by storms. On Saturday, he is standing up doing comedy, really, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, having pulled the trigger on this operation. Right. So you've got all of that going on, and if you could just discuss, you know, it is a mind warp to think of a job so huge, so multifaceted, that, you know, you have to do all these multiple things.
Well, think about that compartmentalization. The president gives the order on the Friday morning in the Situation Room, then literally walks out onto Marine One, gets on a plane to go to Alabama to tour that devastation. Here's the other part of this. Had everything gone as planned, this may have broken on Saturday night. Not last night, but they had a bit of a delay, number one. And two was one thing that I wanted to emphasize. You guys were talking earlier about this continuity. You know, there's one person in particular who's been on this hunt as long as anybody in either administration, and it was one of the holdovers, and that's John Brennan. He's sort of the president's chief advisor on terrorism. This is a guy more than anybody else that has been on this. This is on his desk every day, every second. And, you know, David's right. You know, we sit here, and bin Laden hadn't been, quote, on our radar because, you know, we're in the middle of dealing on the Libya front. We got all the childish, ridiculous games on the political front that we're all forced to deal with front and center. All of that stuff, and bin Laden hadn't been in our front burner. But John Brennan, as much as anybody here in this White House, in this West Wing, provided that continuity. He's somebody that was part of the Bush administration right after 9/11, getting the startup of the counterinsurgency and of the counterterrorism center, something that we didn't have pre-9/11, didn't have those things. So this guy has been involved in this and in this hunt for bin Laden as long as anybody, and I'm sure there's nobody feeling as vindicated today as him.
David, on that same theme, the continuity theme, Chuck mentioned John Brennan. Could you speak to the fact that basically, under the Bush administration's war on terror and the clandestine war on terror, the Obama administration, they didn't really lose a step here. They built upon the building blocks that were out there.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, just look at the record. Ramping up troops in Afghanistan, not directly related here, but what is more germane, of course, is continuing to work the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, despite the fact that the president said on nearly day one that he would close it down. So continuing to work those sources and ramping up intelligence operations in Pakistan, drone attacks, and, of course, when necessary, covert action that we know has been going on launched from Afghanistan in the border areas, but now something as sophisticated as this. and then some of the other areas, too, in terms of how they've been run through the justice system as well. So that continuity is striking. I was reviewing President Bush's memoirs last night. He talks about the great unfinished business of his presidency. The biggest regret he talked about was never getting bin Laden. It fell to his successor to to write Chapter 2 of the War on Terror, which include finally bringing justice to bin Laden. And, you know, Mike, you've talked so much about kind of mood of the country and the emotion of all of this. I was watching last night as that crowd was building outside of the White House and watching as well, of course, what was happening in Times Square. And I looked at the faces. I had a young friend at American University who went down there with his other friends. And he was probably 10 or 12 years old when 9/11 happened. So for these young people, this was literally a nightmare for them when they came of age under this threat of global terror. For my own children, I talk about this only in cryptic terms because I don't want to explain the full trauma of what the nation experienced on 9/11. And so this was something, as Nicole Wallace mentioned a few moments ago, that was a tangible victory, a tangible elimination of someone and something that could really hurt you. And I think that must be said in the middle of this dissection of this event.